My game of the day from round 7 of the Sunway Sitges Chess Festival is Puranik Abhimanyu against Tabatabei, a battle of two teenagers. Abhimanyu is 19 years old, Tabatabei 18 years old. Now the Iranian Tabatabei is on excellent form. He won the Beal Open, always very well contested, and he went straight on to win the Josef Kupper Memorial Tournament, also in Switzerland, afterwards. Well, this was a really remarkable game, actually. At some point, an attack blew up out of nothing, so just watch on. This is great fun. Remember to like, comment, share and subscribe. If you want to support the channel, do check out the links in the video description to PayPal and also patreon.com PowerPlayChess. So it's a gioco piano, and the players, they obviously know their theory because this follows a very trendy line which we've seen before in some games between Anand and Ding in Norway chess, this move Queen B8, but also in the World Cup and also in the Grand Swiss in the Isle of Man. So this trendy idea to play Queen A7 to try and get some pressure here. Now I mentioned this game we've already seen on this channel. Spectacular victory by Anand that went, well, knight F1 and so on. Do check out that video if you haven't already seen it. But Puranik played a calmer move. Bishop takes knight, exchanging off on d4. This has also been seen before, but somehow it's not quite as wildly complicated as those other lines where black is allowed to play Queen A7. And here, Giri against Ding, for example, went Bishop B4. We've also seen Bishop B6 in this position, but Bishop A7 played here by Tabatabei, and this apparently is a novelty. But somehow it makes a lot of sense because it keeps the B file open for the queen, and that means that, well, sometimes we see this move A4 with the idea of rook A3 to swing the rook over in the direction of the king side. But in this case, the queen is ideally placed attacking down the B file. And if knight F1, then Queen B5 is a nice move with the idea of A4, and that means the queen is now secure, and, well, white obviously can't play B3 in this position, so means, that bishop can't move out for the moment. Black has decent play there. So instead of that, let me just go back. After Bishop A7, that was the last move, Queen C2 played, attacking the pawn here. Queen B7 defends, and B3. So Abhimanyu decides just to develop in an unpretentious way. That bishop might come to B2 or A3. Rook E8 with potentially some pressure here. And now A4. Well, this is the classic strategy that you employ when you have a single pawn, a lone pawn, and you can use it to attack these two pawns. And that way you carry out this so-called minority attack and create an isolated pawn. So if this is taken, then Queen A6, and in all likelihood black is going to pick this pawn up, and then there'll be pressure down here as well. So after A4, Abhimanyu decided to play E5, pushing the knight out of the way. First of all, pawns exchanged, and then exchange on E5 and knight D7. So from white's point of view, it's nice that these pawns are now isolated. From black's point of view, it's quite nice that this D5 square will be available for this bishop. And at the moment, well, this pawn is well blockaded, and that means that this bishop somehow doesn't look very impressive. It came back to b2, perhaps looking to play bishop d4 or knight d4, but it already feels as though black is okay. One decent way of playing here is to play knight f8, followed by bishop d5, not worrying about the exchange of these bishops, and that knight can potentially land on e6. Nice blockading position for black. It doesn't really matter that these pawns are doubled, it's all about the position of black's minor pieces. But instead black played bishop c5. Well, it's on an active square, might come here, might come back there. It's reasonable, and the a file opens. And black decides to exchange. And now, quite a committal move, but I think a good move. Black played bishop takes knight. Now, one idea of this is that black really wants to play the bishop to d5, this lovely square on the long diagonal. But then knight f5 is problematic. Knight stands beautifully here, potential to push with e6, and that bishop will suddenly live on this diagonal. So black played bishop takes knight, and I think Tabatabei got it right. I think it's a good move. Now he played bishop d5 here, which is still okay, but I wonder whether he should have played knight f8 first, with potential to come here, potential also to play knight e6 as well. But bishop d5 certainly looks very reasonable in this position. Bishop c3 dropped back. There was potential to play c5 and to take down here, but c5 came anyway. Maybe it's better in this position to play rook e6. This might be the safest for black. We'll see why in a second. Bring the rook over to g6. It's not really possible to launch forward with f4 because this leaves this diagonal open. Queen b6. It's actually a very awkward move to meet. You've got to go to f1, but that's not a nice square because if king, let's say king h2, then queen f2 is deadly. So rook e6 with the idea of rook g6 makes a lot of sense. And here's why. Black played c5, which looks like the most natural move on the board to open up the diagonal. But now rook e3 from Abhimanyu. So simple idea, if bishop takes pawn, then the long diagonal opens for this bishop. It's funny, both players are trying to generate some kind of attack on the long diagonal. Who gets there first? Well, in this case it's definitely white, because after this queen g6 hits bishop and pawn. Remember, the bishop is opened on c3. So after rook e3, knight f8 played, and then rook g3 defends this pawn, but also starts teeing up for an attack here. But knight e6, everything seems okay for the moment for black. Now, f4 will be met by knight takes pawn, so queen f5 played. Somehow this feels very slow from white's point of view. And I was sure that black was all right here. Black probably is okay, actually. But, well, here black played rook a8, which just seems like such a natural move. But actually things are starting to get a little bit problematic. g6 looks a bit strange, but actually it's not really possible to get, well, it is possible to go to f6, but actually there's nothing doing because this bishop is locked out. g6 is possible, queen a8 is possible, and the idea is this, that if f4, then the queen is going to bounce around to the back, and the queen is able to hassle white's pieces, and that one is not so clear. But instead rook a8 played, and king h2, just tucking the king out of the way. And now black played again what looks to be an incredibly natural move, and that's rook a2. Queen b5 is a better move. And one idea of this is if f4, with the idea of moving the queen to one of these squares, then queen e2 stops the queen moving over, and suddenly black has counterplay. And if queen g4, then you take on b3, and if f4, which looks terrifying because of this, then rook a4 pins, and now who knows what's going on. It's a very unclear position. But rook a2 played, but it seems so natural to make this move. You know, it's hard to imagine that black is going to be in trouble after this, but he is after f4. Now this looks like such a slow motion attack. Not only that, it weakens the second rank, and the way is clear on the diagonal. But actually white is fine here because the rook is beautifully positioned. Also, these minor pieces actually just shut out the rook, and f4 is incredibly strong. It's a slow motion attack. Queen g4 and f5 and so on. And black has kind of two moves to do something about that, but there is really no good defense. It's extraordinary. And Tabatabei had, been moving fairly quickly here and was way ahead on the clock. But suddenly in this position, he thought for 27.5 minutes. He basically was looking for a defense and couldn't find one. One key variation is this, h5. Simple idea to prevent queen g4. Now, what about queen takes pawn? Well, then knight takes pawn. Now, if the queen, let's say, comes here, then the knight drops back to e6, and actually black is fine. Once the knight is secure on e6, black doesn't have too much to worry about. So this is the key moment after knight takes f4. In fact, white is winning with this very nice rook sacrifice. And e6, that is absolutely key to open up this bishop. So if the king goes back, then queen takes f7 is mate immediately. So f6, and now white has some fun. In fact, it's forced checkmate. Let me just show you one of the key lines, and that's this. Now, there's probably more than one way to win, but this is the quickest. g4. You think, what on earth is that about? Okay, let's make a random move for black. Well, not so random, as it threatens mate here with queen g2, but actually it's mate. Feels like the king is running away, but no, queen h6 is checkmate. The king is caught. That's actually quite an important variation. So h5 isn't working. Tabatabei played bishop takes pawn, and then queen h5. Now, a similar kind of thing happens on knight takes pawn. Rook g7 is actually winning again with this, followed by queen f7. This one's even more brutal, actually. The king doesn't even escape up the board, for example. So queen h5 played with threats here and threats here. This is white's key strategy in this variation, to advance the e and f pawns. And there is no defense against this rolling up the board, basically. One possibility is rook takes knight. I mean, this is probably the best. It keeps black in the game for a bit. But actually, after bishop e3, but just teeing up for f5, black must be lost. In the game, rook a4 played. And now Abhimanyu finishes off beautifully with f5, attacking this guy, and now e6, opening up this one. So if pawn takes, then it's mate on g7. King back, queen takes pawn. So c6, desperately trying to bring this queen across to defend, but now Abhimanyu finishes in the most efficient way possible. He takes on g7 and f6. If that's taken, queen here, well, white has a winning attack and an extra piece. If you can't see a mate, you're going to win with your extra piece. That's convincing. So f6, king h7 played, rook takes knight, a spiked check. Closes that, the king is still safe. Next move, rook g7 and queen h6, checkmate. Absolute demolition at the end there. And I think, yeah, Tabatabei's problem was that, you know, he was rolling along pretty nicely in this position. And White's attack seems like it's miles away because there's a beautiful blockader here. The bishop looks great. Optically, Black is in total control. But this slow motion attack, 1, 2, 3, actually Black already has to switch on, and defending against this is not simple. But there is a way, and that's with queen b5. But you need to be really alert to realize that in this position, actually, Black is already doomed. So well done to Abhimanyu. I interviewed him in the studio. You know, we're covering the tournament online, and what a nice guy, I have to say. You know, very, very objective and very, very modest as well. Yeah, just very pleasant to have a chat with him. Now, his reward for winning that game is that he's on board 2 with Black against Igor Kovalenko from Latvia. So, top scores at the moment. Korobov has 6.5 out of 7. He drew with Ivanchuk today. Korobov on 6.5, and then 2 players on 6 points. Durabaili from Azerbaijan and Puranik Abhimanyu from India. So 3 rounds to go, and it's still wide open.